This is The Change Physician, episode 184. Welcome back to The Change Physician. I'm Melissa Katie with my co-host, Dr. Kevin Cuccaro, and we're here today to do another chat about a mind-shifting book and the 4-Hour Workweek by, I'll let you fill it out.
Mr. Tim Ferris.
Tim Ferris. I get the first names wrong all the time, so I didn't want to.
Did you call him Tom Ferris?
Who
Teddy
knows
Ferris?
what would come out of my mouth? I don't know. Anyway, why don't you take it away and kind of give your intro to the book?
Sure. So we're talking about is the 4-Hour Workweek. This is a classic by Mr. Tim Ferris here. He wrote this in 2007, I think. This is I have the 2009 edition when he did a little revision, and he hasn't done a revision, and from all intents and purposes that I don't think he will. This book, I remember when this book came out, it's got this this thing, and everybody jumps on the title and says, "Oh, that's such a scam, like the 4-Hour Workweek or whatever." And honestly, that's one of the reasons I didn't buy it the first time I saw it, because it's interesting. You know, the subheadline is the 4-Hour Workweek: escape the 9-to-5, live anywhere, and join the new rich. And sees this person in their little hammock here. So you're like, oh man, I can not have to work.
Talk about marketing right there.
Is brilliant. And actually the story goes, what he did is, so Tim is a amazing marketer as well. And so when he wrote this book, he actually printed up a bunch of covers and then put them on, when we had Barnes and Nobles, he put them on books. And then he sat there and watched which ones people grabbed. And this was the one they gravitated to, because apparently he also wanted to say the 2-Hour Workweek, but that was too unbelievable. The whole story of this, though, and what this was like a total mind shifter. It was this idea that the standard life that we've all been sort of, well, not all of us, but most of us have been kind of programmed to believe is the way it goes, is you go to school, you go to college, you go to medical school if you're a doctor, you come out, you get your practice, you work in your practice for 30 years, and then you can retire and you can do the things that you want to do. And what this book, and there are other ones, but this one caught the mainstream, basically says that you don't have to do that. Like, and I think what really resonated about this is the idea, if you hate what you do and you're going to then do it for 30 years, what is the actual cost involved with that? Mm-hmm. Because time is this irreducible, you will never, it's the equalizer across all social economic strata. Everybody has the same amount of time. And what are you going to choose to do with it? And so his thing was, this was early in the internet age, so leveraging the internet to create what he called a muse that can fund your life, right? And that's what a lot of people focused on, was this idea of, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a little internet business, and then that's going to make me rich and I'll never have to, or actually not rich, that's going to fund my life. Because the other thing about this, so this wasn't about necessarily developing assets. So we just talked about Rich Dad Poor Dad and assets per se. This was focusing on how to develop income that was not dependent on your time, or was location independent, or both.
Right.
And that was sort of the game changer, is instead of looking at it like I have to work for 30 years and save all this retirement dollars and then I can live my life, it's like, well, what's your spend? And if you have your spend, like this is the money that you need to live every month. Mm-hmm. That's how much money that's, the verbiage sometimes being the nut. That's your nut. Once you can pay your nut, that's, then you're kind of free, right? Or at least you can do whatever you want to do. So the whole idea with this book was then, hey, if you keep your costs low and you develop income streams that can cover those costs, you can pretty much do whatever the hell you want. Freedom. And you can put as much time or a little as you want. And so so the big pickup here was, this was my first kind of foray into thinking like an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. And the other thing, it made me think about life differently. Like the fact that, hey, I could do something different. I don't have to necessarily do something that I hate or whatever for 30 years, as long as I can start thinking in terms of cash flow with income and expenses. So kind of similar in a lot of ways to Kiyosaki's book, but more specific to the idea of looking what your cash flow is and what your income is in measuring that. Because once your income and your cash flow, or I should say your expenses equal your income, and that income is coming from assets that are not time dependent anymore. That's the idea that's financially independent.
Yeah.
And whatever that is. And so super powerful book, really, really influenced me. I think when we talked to Dave Draginas, I told him to buy this book, and really influenced him. And it has that scammy title on it, but that scammy title sold.
Yeah, it did. And I was just looking at his other books, The 4-Hour Body, The 4-Hour Chef, Tool of Titans, Tribe of Mentors. I mean, he's got the Tim Ferris show and podcast, and
super popular show.
Yeah. I mean, he's got millions of downloads. I actually, the first time I encountered this, I actually listened to the audiobook. I don't know if I actually read the book, but I was commuting a lot at that time. I think I was just out of my residency. What year did that come in? Do you remember?
2000. The first edition came out in 2007, and it was subtly revised. It came out in 2009.
Yeah, I think I was in my first year or my fellowship. I think it was my first year out of my pain fellowship, and I was working 2 or 3 days a week, and I was commuting back and forth for an hour. So I think I may have listened to it on my commutes. But yeah, I think we've talked about this before. I came even out of there's something that shifted. I listened to like Tony Robbins before I even finished all my training in medicine, and lots of other people. Who was the there was another gentleman. Anyway, I think even starting out, not wanting to be full time and feeling like to be free from like this confine of a 9-to-5 job, and this all just layers into probably why you and I are probably a little different than some other of our colleagues. But I find that there's colleagues even recently that have been, just one of them was talking about they were listening to a couple of our podcasts and sharing it with their friends because they're not happy. And so sometimes the pain of that unhappiness makes people seek for other kinds of options or some hope that there's something else out there for them. So I think this 4-hour work week also helps people realize that it doesn't mean it's going to happen overnight, but you can create something different. Any solid points or anything out of that book you wanted to share?
Well, it is kind of interesting because the meat of it is really in the beginning. At least I should say that the meat of it for me was in the beginning when he was talking about the idea that acted to design your life rather than wait until retirement. And so the term lifestyle design, I think he actually says he used it first, and he may have. I know other people have used it a lot after that. Mm-hmm. But was really just being really conscientious of what you want your life to look like. If you want and you need a lot of income and you're going to want to work 15-hour days or 20-hour days every day forever,
and you love it,
that's fine. But if you don't figure out ways to extricate yourself from that scenario. And there's multiple different ways. So that was probably one of the bigger ones. This was, again, my first interest, or my first kind of introduction into the idea of entrepreneurship, because he's talking specifically about internet jobs, but a lot of these ideas comes from direct marketing. Mm-hmm. What he just did is he sort of took ideas that had been literally been published for decades in the direct marketing space about how to, target a market, find out the desire of that market, identify the core need, to create a product that satisfies that need, and then being able to reach them through advertising that works by conversion, by direct conversion, actionable advertising, not brand advertising. And he just translated more into the internet age. And then the rest of the book, there's a whole lot of this book that is sort of like, I'm going to use the word, I'm not disparaging it, I don't think, but it's more fluffy.
Yes.
There's a lot of fluffy stuff. And it's life in here, or when you now have your business and you don't have to worry about it, and you feel like you're in this void of inertia. Here's some stuff that you can do. Actually, it's funny because I'm reading them and going, God, there's some of the stuff I should probably reread again, because maybe I'm probably in a different point now where in my life.
Isn't that funny? Yeah.
Well, and it is funny and it's weird and it kind of bops you over the head because I was actually going to say this to you. God, I can't remember when. This just reminded me of you said something and I meant make this comment and I totally forgot. But it's the fact that every time you read a book, you're actually a different person and the book is then different.
Yes.
I like this year I'm rereading books. I had this promise I'm not going to buy books I broke at when I bought The Power of Regret. Because of the fact that what I've really been noticing is I'm going back now and I'm rereading things. And because of other readings that I've done, there's a greater depth because, you know, just like the curse of knowledge is we forget what other people know. The other part is if you don't know something and you read a book, you're going to pick up one idea, but there's, I guarantee you there's deeper points that the author is trying to communicate that you are not even picking up because you don't see them.
Right.
And a lot of that I think is, and, you know, and most people see that and just think, oh, I'm going to design an internet business and I'm going to, you know, work 4 hours and run around the world. There's a whole lot more depth into this beyond that, because this is about marketing. This is about product market fit. This is about cash flow. This is about looking where, you know, designing your life. This is the idea of, this is the first thing that introduced me to the idea of geographic arbitrage, about how you can get paid in dollars and live in other countries that have a lower cost of living very, very well, and using that kind of strategy, which is very popular now. And even for, there's internet entrepreneurs, there's a whole community of them in Southeast Asia that have done this. We have people that are like, you know, Bill and Acacia Catterley who did this very early on in retirement. They're using geographic arbitrage. So there's a lot of powerful ideas in here across the spectrum. So now I'm thinking, you know, I just said this is fluff. Maybe those fluffs I need to reread because they're probably a lesson I'm missing in this stuff.
Maybe they're less fluffy now.
Maybe they're less fluffy. And it's sort of, you know, you mentioned his other book. So I have the 4-Hour Body. I have the 4-Hour Chef. I got
Really?
I do. Maybe I'll just, okay. So with the 4-Hour Workweek, how he promoted that book was he went out and he went out all these early internet conferences and he met all the bloggers. And once he became friends with the bloggers, when he had the book, he had them read it. And because they had these influential blogs, they would publish their reviews, and it really drove interest in the book. He was one of the first people who sort of leveraged this blog thing. Then for the 4-Hour Body, the way he drove that up to the New York Times bestseller list is he did these promos. By that time, his blog was fairly successful. And so with the 4-Hour Body, he said, hey, you know what? I'm publishing this new book. If you buy this many copies, you're going to get this. If you buy this many copies, you're going to get this. If you buy this many copies of it, we're going to do this. And if you're buying like a lot of copies, we're going to do this safari or something crazy, right? Because what they've been doing is they gamed basically the New York Times bestselling list, where you need like 20,000 books sold or something in the first couple of weeks to get to the first page.
Right.
Well, then when the 4-Hour Chef came out, that was the last time he did one of these promos. And by that time I had read the books and I was really interested in all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, I had some completely unrealistic expectations, but I bought into the promo in the high end promo, which ended up with us all going to Buenos Aires. So I actually met him and spent 5-6 days there. And it was one of the most surreal experiences of my life.
Wow.
Because I was now in an environment that was so unfamiliar to me, not Buenos Aires, not the foreign thing. The people I was with were all entrepreneurs who were living these lives. A lot of them were very, very wealthy from their entrepreneurial endeavors, and were like literally these people who just like drop and then they travel over here and they're working online and all this stuff. And, you know, one of these things was not like the other. And that one of those things was me, without a doubt, it was me. It was so bizarre. It was so surreal. When I got home, I almost felt like it didn't even occur, because I've never been so far out of my comfort zone. But it introduced me to, this stuff can work. Like this, there are people doing this, and it's possible. Like, I think that was the major thing that I took away from what was possible. So yeah, it had a huge influence on my life, for sure. And it's been interesting. There's a couple of people I still keep in contact from way back then, not a lot of them. Yeah, anyway, so he's a master marketer, but I also say he's got a good heart in a lot of ways, and he's not trying in any ways to. When people say he's a scam artist, dude, he's not a scam artist. I can tell you that he's not a scam artist. He actually lived. He had this business. He was selling a supplement that would actually funded his lifestyle. He's really, really, really good at marketing. But he really is working to make the world a better place. Yeah.
Well, and it's not easy to do. I actually just looked on Amazon with that tribe of mentors, and it's basically the best advice from all these successful people, and the people that probably some people you're surrounded by on that trip. But I think I might get that book just because I love the depth of it. It reminds me of when I was in San Antonio at a very wealthy man's house when I was a anesthesia resident. Somehow I don't know why we were there. Someone knew somebody, and I have no shame. I just asked him. I was like, "So what do you think? What is it that other people don't know that's really the like key to doing well financially?" And it was a straightforward answer. It's like, you create a system. And it stuck with me. Like, I still remember where I was standing in that kitchen during that party, and it was so simple. But that's they can just, people that do this and understand how you can be successful or wealthy, they can distill that into simplicity. But don't get them wrong. There's a lot of work behind the simplicity.
Simple is not easy. Does not mean easy.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the 4-hour work week is, people might perceive this as, oh, this simple, it's exactly 4 hours and that's how I'm going to work. It's like, there's a marketing to that. There's a point behind that. And it's that you don't have to give up your whole week in the way that you've been giving it up.
It's a lot more hours than 4 trying to build to the point where you have a system that allows you to work for. Yeah.
Exactly. The system building is where you front load your work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I love it. I don't really have anything else to say beyond that. It's been a while since I've listened to it. And it's, if you want to capture some snippets of what he talks about, and so you can find a book of his or the 4-hour work week, or listen to his podcast for free, and you can get an idea of kind of some of these mindset shifts. And I think when you, like you say, I don't know if it was in the last episode, when you stay focused and disciplined, pick one thing, stay focused on it, perhaps just trying to just change your mindset, maybe think about things differently because you're maybe not in the best place and you don't want to be in this for the rest of your life. Start listening to people that are doing things differently and infuse your brain with some, different ways of thinking about it. And it's amazing how you start evolving with that mindset shift.
Yeah, no, and this one was a big one. One of the things I really like about what he does in his books is he's really good at simplification.
Mm-hmm.
Quite good at simplification. Sometimes I wish, because he talks about his language, like he's a polyglot, and God, I wish he would just write a language book, like how you.
What's a polyglot?
Speak multiple languages.
Oh.
And so in the 4-hour chef, which is actually not about cooking, it's about learning. He kind of talks about one of his processes for learning. But in the 4-hour work week, he breaks this down into DEAL, into the 4 kind of steps. And step 1 for D, and people are going to recognize this, is definition. Is really being able to define, the rules that you're living under versus the rules that are potential. Looking at what your lifestyle is, looking at changing this perception from simply income and burn into more about like, well, what's your spend and what do you need in order to maintain the stream lifestyle. He has an exercise in there called dreamlining, where he's like, all these people are deferring, that's the other big thing, the deferred lifestyle plan. Like, oh, when I get to this point is where I'm going to live. And he's like, well, if you what is it, the things that you really want in a dream life, and what you may actually find is that they're more affordable than part of that is because he's looking at a payment structure. So instead of thinking in terms of like what we just talked about in the last episode about assets and income and things, this one's strictly about cash flows and cash flow streams. So if this part doesn't resonate with me. Like if you want like some fancy car and you want this fancy thing, what you really are looking at is the payment of it. Like rather than just buying it, well, what's the payment? If it's $1,000 a month, well, if you have an income that meets $1,000 a month, that's cost neutral now. So it's figuring out, again, what's important to your life and what's important, and then what the actual costs are on those on a month-to-month basis, and then order to design your life and income streams in order to address it. So I thought that was really, really powerful, that definition part. And then elimination was really about focus. And then the other parts, the automation, is really leveraging the internet and talking about, using internet and really the automation that we have in order to offload responsibilities for you, which is, you can sell things by the internet, and the advantage of doing it by the internet is because you don't have to think about it. It's always up on your website. That's sort of an amplification of the old marketing principle of duplicating your sales team through copy, like your sales techniques. So you're taking this sales technique, put it online, and now you don't have to be selling every day. And then the last part is talking about, that's sort of the aspirational standpoint. Once you've actually freed your time and you have your income from your Muse that's matching all this stuff, well, now what do you do? Which actually is a problem. Like, what do you do with your time when you're in there? So it's a little dated because this was the early days of the internet, prior to 2010. A lot of the actual tactics when they're talking about Google and Google AdWords to kind of identify markets and things, those are cost prohibitive now because it's way more expensive game doing this. This was really early when people were getting like penny nickel clicks for online advertising. That doesn't happen anymore. But the general ideas. So I'm going to say is this: if you can find this book in the library, do it that way. I wouldn't necessarily pay for it. Well, I can't say that. If you're like really challenged about like thinking, really having a difficult time thinking beyond the only way that I can live my life is trading time for money, I would probably introduce this book. It's a great way to kind of shifting away and thinking now instead of, Kiyosaki was talking about assets and liabilities and what quadrant you're working on. This one's really just focusing on the idea between what your expenses are with your ideal lifestyle and how to then to develop these income streams to cover that in such a way. And then arbitraging that some of it may be lowering your expenses. Some of it may be lowering your expenses by going to a different country to provide a different lifestyle where now your income can cover it that way. But very, very thought provoking and certainly a mind shift one.
Yeah. Agreed. That was a perfect place to transition to take us out.
Well, I think did I start this one or did you start this one?
I'm not sure.
Anyway. All right, folks. Well, we're going to end the episode here, and we always enjoy having you with us on these podcasts. If you have a favorite book, let us know. You can email me directly at drkevin@thechangedphysician.com. And until next time, stay well.
Take care.